Hi, my name is Andre Jick. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the epic video because today we're talking about everything you need to know about Bitcoin and investing with special guest Anthony Pompliano, who's a venture capitalist who's invested more than $100 million into early tech startups and of course Bitcoin. He's a huge player in the crypto space, and today I asked you on Discord and Instagram to ask him your hardest hitting questions about Bitcoin. So this was super insightful and a really cool video. He was not easy to track down because when you got 100 mil, you're David Copperfield. You don't have much time for YouTubers, so this was awesome. So anyway, let's just get started right away. And the first question we had for him is about Bill Gates and what he thinks about Bitcoin and why he doesn't like it. All right, Anthony, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
My audience has a bunch of questions for you about Bitcoin, so you ready?
Let's do it.
Bill Gates just recently came out, I don't know if you saw this. Bitcoin's mining process was super harmful to the environment. So if he was here talking to us right now, what would you say to him?
Bill Gates is an incredibly intelligent person. He's had, immense success in the business world, but he comes from a position where he really understands software, and he's probably not as educated and just doesn't have the time to spend to understand some of the nuance. And so there's plenty of studies that show over 70% of miners use renewable energy. And I think really what the important part to understand is that the mining business is based on your cost of power or electricity, and then the Bitcoin of which you are mining. What is the price of it? And so naturally, there's a financial incentive to go around the world and find the cheapest power. As we know, renewable or clean power ends up being the cheapest, most efficient power. And so things like hydro, wind, solar, et cetera, tend to be the selection. But we also even see things like the capture of gas flaring and using that to turn that into electricity and power for the mining process. And so I would actually say that not only is Bill Gates probably inaccurate in terms of it's harmful to the environment, but there's a very strong argument, and one I think that everyone from Elon Musk on down agrees with, is that Bitcoin mining specifically is driving R&D for clean power, renewable power. And so it is probably one of the greatest capital inflows to that space. And so it's a really, really important thing, I think, for that space as it develops.
That makes a lot of sense. So I want to get your personal opinion. Is Bitcoin actually decentralized, or is it somehow controlled by the development teams or the miners? There's some speculation that there is some centralness to Bitcoin. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, so I think that if you look at kind of all of the cryptocurrencies or crypto assets, Bitcoin by far is the most decentralized, right? People will debate, it's on the internet. And if the internet goes down, then that means there's centralization. Well, kind of, but you can still get connectivity through satellites or kind of all these edge case or kind of one-off situations. And so I think that naturally when we think of decentralization, we think of it in terms of the hardware that is actually mining and running the software, super decentralized when it comes to Bitcoin, by far the most decentralized. Two is that it is a programmatic open protocol that is decentralized in ownership. There's no one company or individual that owns it or controls it. And then three is there's a whole bunch of what I'll call checks and balances in the system, right? If all of a sudden somebody wants to make a change and the majority of people reject that change, those people are not necessarily prevented from making the change. They can fork Bitcoin and go off and do whatever they want. But what we've seen time and time again is that the value accrues to the consensus among those in the community. And so wherever the majority of people go, that's where the value goes. And I think that that is a really strong sign that shows that the decentralization is important, but also the decentralization is there. And so I think that it would be pretty naive for people to think that Bitcoin is not decentralized at this point.
The next question for Pomp is about quantum computing. Can Bitcoin actually survive the evolution to quantum computing, or is quantum computing going to destroy Bitcoin's value overnight?
So what people forget is when there's advancement of technology, the good guys and the bad guys both accelerate at a pretty similar pace. So you see this with, who are the first people to adopt new technology usually? Nefarious governments, criminals, etc. And then law enforcement very quickly figures out what they're doing and they try to use it actually to catch those people, right? And so I think that naturally people will say, quantum computing is going to come and somebody's going to hack the Bitcoin network. Well, just as fast as quantum computing is kind of being figured out, right? There are no true quantum computers yet, but as that's being figured out, there's also defense to quantum computing. That's a technological field as well, and that's accelerating at a similar pace. And so I don't think that at the surface there's an issue there. The second thing is, even if somebody does develop a quantum computer, part of the value or the main value prop of Bitcoin is that it's never been hacked before. And so if somebody comes and hacks Bitcoin and you take all the Bitcoin, it would just go to zero. And so you basically would have to be a non-economic actor in order to think, I should hack the Bitcoin network. Because once you hack it, all the value goes away. So you're basically stealing nothing. It'd be like going to the bank, robbing the bank, but taking monopoly money, right? You can't use it anywhere. You can't do anything with it. So why rob the bank? I think similar thing here with Bitcoin. And so naturally, if somebody develops a quantum computer, I can think of a lot of other things that they're going to want to attack or steal rather than Bitcoin, which eventually becomes, obsolete and with no value the second that it's hacked.
Not only that, but don't you think it's true that Bitcoin could hard fork to another consensus model and just change that?
You are getting deeper in the weeds, but yes, there are responses that could occur that would essentially protect Bitcoin or serve as kind of a safety net in terms of that value. But from just a game theory standpoint, I think that it would be pretty naive and uneducated of somebody to try to hack it.
What happens if the government, because that's a lot of fear from people, it's like, what happens if the government bans Bitcoin? Like, what do you think would happen? Is that even a possibility?
Yeah, I don't think we really need to speculate. We have data points that show this. So in Pakistan, Nigeria, and other places around the world, Bitcoin has been banned. And what we've seen is adoption has gone up. And ultimately, it's because when you have an open, decentralized protocol, people are going to use it regardless of what the laws are. And so when you ban it, what you do is you run a marketing campaign. And so both in Pakistan and Nigeria, as examples, hundreds of % increase in price, in usage, in mining, et cetera. And so I think that what governments around the world have to understand is if you ban an open, decentralized protocol, you're essentially cutting your citizens off, but allowing everyone else to continue to use it. Best example of that is North Korea stopped using this open, decentralized protocol called the internet. It didn't work out so well for them, right? Everyone else used the internet and ended up benefiting. And so I think if any country wants to ban ownership, they're just hurting themselves. They're shooting themselves in the foot. Instead, what countries need to do is they need to embrace it and say, if anyone's going to benefit from this, our country is going to be a leader in benefiting from it, and go ahead and figure out how to do that.
He's right. Like I've said before, countries do not collaborate in unison with each other to try to ban Bitcoin because they all want the largest piece of the pie for themselves. So where one country fails and decides to ban Bitcoin, another one will step in and see it as a golden opportunity to entice investors. Anthony, you and I are going to time travel to the future to the year 2140. I'm sure you know the significance of it. So all of the Bitcoins have been mined out of the Bitcoin space. What incentive is there for the miners to continue to secure the network if there's no longer any Bitcoin to be mined from the blocks?
Yeah, so the big thing is transaction fees, right? There's a couple of other things that feed into it, but essentially if you think about Visa or MasterCard, what is their revenue, right? For running that network, they get transaction fees. And so naturally when you have a decentralized payment system like the Bitcoin network, that doesn't accrue in terms of transaction fees to a centralized P&L. It instead goes and is paid to all of the people running the software or running that network. And so you, as a miner, get a pro rata share of the transaction fees. Small today, growing very quickly, will continue to grow. By 2140, I think it will be very, very profitable over the years. Unfortunately, most of us are not going to be here to see that, but I do think that's kind of the answer as to why they'll still have an economic incentive to run the network.
Another really popular but great question people had for him is, what if we find out who Satoshi Nakamoto is? What if we find out the identity of the creator of Bitcoin? So the Coinbase IPO filing actually listed that as one of the potential threats for a price collapse. So what would actually happen?
Yeah, so I definitely think one of the advantages to Bitcoin is that nobody knows who the creator is. There's the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. I personally don't want to know who it is. I think because of that value is really the main driver why I don't want to know. With that said, if we did find out, I don't know if there would be a material impact over the long term. There might be some short-term price either up or down depending on who it actually was. Is it an individual, an organization, a nation state, whoever? But again, I don't think that over a long period of time it really matters. People say the same thing about like, what if Satoshi's Bitcoin move? Again, short term, there might be some fear or excitement or whatever. But over a long term, I just don't think it matters at this point. The cat's out of the bag and people realize this is a superior system that they want to use.
That makes a lot of sense. So following that, do you think that Bitcoin will ever become a currency? Because I had a really good question on my Discord. Somebody asked, why do you think a deflationary currency like Bitcoin is better than inflationary currency if deflationary incentivizes people to hold on to it, right, and not spend it, whereas inflationary currencies encourage people to actually spend the money, which grows the velocity of money, which obviously is a good indicator of a healthy economy. So why would we want a deflationary currency?
Well, we essentially worked on a very similar system, a sound money system, up until 1971, right? And literally for thousands and thousands of years. And so it's actually the fiat currency, the ability for a government at will to create new currency and expand or contract the money supply at their desire. That is an experiment that's been 50 years or so, right? So it's actually the fiat is the outlier, not so much the sound money. So I think that Bitcoin kind of fits with the historical narrative and is a return back to what we know has worked for a very, very long period of time. With that said, I think that people constantly look at the 21 million. They forget that it's divisible, 100 million Satoshis in a Bitcoin. But that also plays, I think, into some of the liquidity and some of the mental components around spending versus saving or holding.
All right, so now let's talk about what I'm sure everybody wants to know about. Let's talk price. So when is this bull run going to end? When are we going to reach the end of this cycle? And more importantly, what's going to happen in September?
Yeah, so I have no clue is the short answer, right? I have some opinions, but don't factually know what will happen. I don't think anyone does. What we can learn from history, though, is that when the halving occurs every 4 years, about 18 months after that event, basically is kind of this ultra bullish kind of blow off top. It appears that we're headed to the same thing again. All signs say that this one might be bigger than any one in the past. But I think that just from where we sit today to that point, which is kind of Q3 or beginning of Q4, we will be higher than we are today. How much higher? How quickly do we get there? Everyone is debating. Literally, people are betting billions and billions of dollars in the market on those outcomes. So I don't think I have anything extra to contribute other than I think we'll just be higher than where we are today.
Did you know that Elon Musk bought Bitcoin when he did, or did you know beforehand? Were you like, I already know he's bought some?
I had heard from pretty good sources before it was announced that there was a purchase that was made. But again, as with all rumors, you don't know for sure until you get the confirmation and the announcement. So I kind of just sat back and waited, but was not overly surprised when it was announced.
The next question I had for POMP is more about the price indicator. What needs to happen to Bitcoin to accelerate its growth to $100,000 and beyond? What is the next catalyst?
I think we just got the one that we need to get to $100,000, which is the federal government deciding that they're going to do a $1.9 trillion stimulus package and flood the market with more liquidity. I think that easily carries us to $100,000. I think that there will be other stimulus packages, kind of behind it. There's a $2 trillion infrastructure package that's being discussed, et cetera. So I don't think that this is going to stop anytime soon. And all assets, whether it's real estate, precious metals, Bitcoin, et cetera, will continue upwards to varying degrees. And then the other milestone I'm waiting for is a central bank. Somewhere in the world is going to come out. They're going to say, we have bought Bitcoin, we have put it in our central bank reserves, and we are proud of it. And we think that this is a strategy going forward. And that will lead to, I think, another kind of inflection point.
Why do you think Jerome Powell is telling us that inflation is going to be low? They're keeping our expectations low. Do you think that there's something going on?
I think that if they were to say anything else, people would, in mass hysteria, leave the dollar, which would be very detrimental to the strategy that they have. And so, whether they believe what they're saying or not, nobody knows. But I don't think that the data suggests what they are saying is accurate. And so whenever you hear the Federal Reserve Chairman mention the unofficial numbers, it makes you question if he understands and is referencing those. Why do we have official numbers? So we'll see how that plays out.
What are some strategies for beginners watching this video who may not be in crypto right now? They're asking for strategies to get into Bitcoin. Is there anything you recommend to them specifically?
I just always suggest the same thing. Do your own research, understand what you're buying, understand that this is a currency that you can denominate your wealth in, and then dollar cost average. And dollar cost average is the most important thing. Have this really, really long time horizon and say, hey, every Monday I'm going to buy $10. And I'm going to buy that $10 every single day for years and years and years. Every Monday for years and years and years. And so if you do that, it doesn't matter what price is, just you're doing it on a frequent basis. And I think that's ultimately what has proven to be the most successful strategy over the last few years.
Do you like Ethereum or Dogecoin at all? Any comments?
They're entertaining to me, but I hold none. So my opinion doesn't matter. Just look at what I hold.
Wow. Okay. So even Ethereum, you're like, no, I'm good.
I just look, I think of it as a Venn diagram. What's the thing that I understand better than anything else? Where's kind of my circle of competence? And then where where do I believe that there are attractive returns? And when I put those two circles over each other, Bitcoin is at the heart of over that overlap. And so I tend to just focus on the thing that I understand best and choose to spend most of my time thinking about.
Guys, I tried. He's set on Bitcoin. Do you have an exit strategy for this?
The exit strategy was getting into Bitcoin.
Okay.
So I kind of think of it as I've converted this fiat devaluing currency into a currency where the purchasing power continues to appreciate, at somewhere around 200% compound annual growth rate for a decade. And so far, that's proved to be a pretty smart decision.
Is Bitcoin going to go to 100K over or under by the end of this year?
So in 2019, I wrote a piece publicly and said, after it had dropped from about 6,500 to 3,000 and then crossed over 10, that my next kind of thought process was that Bitcoin would hit 100K by the end of 2021. So far, we are tracking very nicely against that. And somehow I'm now the most conservative person in the room on that, but I'm going to stick with 100K by the end of this year.
All right, so there's one last question for Pomp. But in the meantime, don't forget to grab up to $250 worth of free Bitcoin using this link right here, blockfi.com/Andre. And also don't forget to grab up to 2 free stocks with Webull. By depositing $100, you'll get 2 free stocks. Each can be valued up to $1,850. Link down below. And if you want to track those 2 stocks, you can download the spreadsheet and my Patreon down below. So the last question I had for Pomp is something that I hear people say all the time, which is Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. It's backed by nothing and it's worthless.
Bitcoin is backed by the #1 commodity in the world today, which is computing power. And so although there's things that are backed by cash flows or other types of hard assets, ultimately what you end up finding is that computing power is the #1 sought after commodity in today's world. And the Bitcoin network runs on the strongest computer network in the world. It is by far the strongest computing network. And so therefore, not only is it backed by a commodity and computing power, but it's actually backed by probably the most valuable thing that gives it this inherent intrinsic value. And so that's a new way to think about commodities for some people. But I think ultimately in this new technology enabled world, it's the right way to think about it.
Not only that, but what gives it intrinsic value is that human trust, which you could argue is one of the most valuable commodities in the world.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And go check out pompletter.com. It's his newsletter and it is packed with incredible information about Bitcoin. Love you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you back here on Monday and Friday, sometimes a Wednesday. Bye-bye.